Oh boy, it's the O Wrestling Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, CW. Make sure to hit that bell on YouTube and subscribe to the podcast on any and all platforms. Today, we're going to talk about some anecdotes about backyard wrestling and don't try this at home notices on the WWE pay-per-views and shows. You know, that is the disclaimer that WWE had to slap on all of their shows for quite some time. I'm pretty sure they still do it. I don't think they do. I haven't seen one on Raw or SmackDown, but maybe it happens like in the intro or right before the intro or something. I'm not sure, but I know back in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, WWE had to put a notice up when the show started for the don't try this at home, for all the kids who were pile driving their sisters and little brothers and whatnot. I believe the real, not real reason, but one of the reasons why they had to do that was obviously kids were doing moves to people, and putting that notice covered their asses. Look, we told them not to do it. We said at the beginning of the show, this is not for you. This is for trained professionals. But there was a kid who is now an adult man who is still in jail because I believe he killed his little sister doing a tombstone or something, like he broke her neck or some nonsense. And look, I refuse to look it up, okay? That's not what this podcast is. It's not a research podcast. I'm not going to go searching for the facts. It's out there if you want to look it up. It's a really old case. I'm pretty sure that guy's still in jail, and now he is a grown-ass man who murdered his sister with a wrestling move. So WWE was like, all right, we'll put a warning label on our product for kids to not do it. But that doesn't mean that kids didn't still do it. It just meant, you know, now when they saw that, they probably did other moves like I don't know, kicks to the gut or a rising knee lift, or I don't know, you tell me. What kind of moves were kids doing to each other? I think it's every wrestling move, and that kind of led to a lot of backyard wrestling. Well, I don't think that led to backyard wrestling, but it certainly didn't help. So the rise of backyard wrestling really took off with, I think, YouTube. When YouTube was going on, you know, you can post videos of your backyard wrestling antics, and people just diving off of roofs and onto, you know, IKEA tables and taking wild and inappropriate moves. I believe the Hardys did backyard wrestling. That was kind of their foray into professional wrestling, but I digress. I bring up backyard wrestling because I knew a guy in high school who put on his own sort of backyard wrestling stuff. I heard him talking about it while sitting in the dean's office. I don't remember why I was in the dean's office. I was a good kid, but I was there, and so was he. And he was talking to someone about a match that he had with someone else at the school. And I was like, what are you guys talking about? He's like, yeah, we do backyard wrestling. And I had a match against him, and he took, power bomb through a table or some nonsense. They were going on and on and on and on and on. And in my head, the only thing I could think of was the backyard wrestling video game. There was an old PlayStation game that was I believe it was just called Backyard Wrestling, and it looked like trash. Not just because it was on PlayStation, but because, you know, it just, backyard wrestling was very much like the grittiest of the gritty. It was like having what were those, like, Kimbo Slice fights where they would just beat up someone in an alley, or they would find someone's backyard and just turn on the tape and just start kicking the crap out of each other prior to going to the UFC and doing it on a grander stage. When you really see like the genesis of these things, like someone like Kimbo Slice, who was he was a legit street fighter. If Street Fighter wasn't a game and it came out, you know, in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, there would be a character based on Kimbo Slice because he was legit. He was on the roster. He would fight in the street with whoever. And then at some point, Dana White was like, yeah, let's bring that guy into the UFC. And hey, street fighting doesn't translate into cage fighting. He didn't do great, mostly because his cardio wasn't up. I'm digressing. That's all this episode is going to be. I'll double back. So yeah, they were talking about backyard wrestling, and I said, "Oh, that's cool." Smash cut to maybe 5-6 years later. I signed up for kickboxing classes. I want to learn to beat people's face in, and I get to the class, and they line up, and the instructor walks in, and who is it? It's the guy that was doing the backyard wrestling, the first guy. I was like, holy crap. He was toned, he was ripped, and I was like, oh, okay, this makes a whole lot of sense. He started doing backyard wrestling and then got a taste for kicking the crap out of people, became a black belt. I believe he was already training, but became a black belt, then became an instructor, and ended up at my school. So I ended up at his school. Let me not claim that school. So I walked up. I was like, "Hey, man, what's up?" And he goes, "Oh, crap. I can't believe it's you. It's been so long, blah, blah, blah." I was like, "Oh, that's great. You're being an instructor." He's like, yeah, it's going to be great. I'm here on these days. So make sure you're here on these days. You and I can train together. I was like, all right, sure. So I would try my best to get to class whenever he was instructing. And it was one of those classes where the instructor, so they're going to use you as an example, not because like they don't like you, but because they just want to like interact with you. They're like, all right, I have a person I know here. I'm going to put some moves on that person just because they know that I'm not trying to hurt them. They get the familiarity. But for me, I would just get tapped out every goddamn class because he would use me as the test dummy. And then, but all things being fair, it did help me learn a lot faster. But yeah, backyard wrestling led to people becoming a black belt. It's a weird aside, I know. Just follow me through. That same, let's double back quite a bit. That the notice, please don't try this at home. I took that to heart. I didn't want to do wrestling moves to anybody. I never had the inkling. But there was one instance where I didn't adhere to the WWE's notice, and I tried some wrestling moves, and it got me in trouble. Standing in line at in high school waiting to get into class. There was a class going on. We lined up prior to that class, outside the class, before the bell rings. The bell would ring. People would get out the class. You'd go into class. I was standing outside waiting to go into a class, and Dad's First Time, shout out Dad's First Time, Dad's First Time, was going to the class next door to mine. And you couldn't put us in the same vicinity without us acting stupid. So we get to talk, and we're talking about The Rock and Stone Cold and all this stuff. And then we're just like pantomiming moves. And at Dad's First Time, I believe he just catches me in a stunner. He stuns some other kid. And then the dope that I am, I get up after that stunner, and then I go to give Dad's First Time a stunner. I complete the stunner, kick him in the gut, hit him with the move. He falls down. I get up. I turn around. Both teachers walked out of the classroom and are staring at me, and they go, "Detention." I'm like, oh, come on, man. First of all, it was the first time I think I ever got detention in the school. It was both myself and Dad's First Time got detention for that. The people who were also messing with us, they went quiet real fast. They were like, "We are not a part of that." And to their credit, of course, don't get roped into that too. Move as far away from us as possible. So we ended up having to go to detention for pretending to be The Rock and Stone Cold. So kids, if you're listening to this, don't try it at home. You never know what might happen. You might, get detention or murder a sibling. Both bad, both not good. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to this episode, this rambling episode of the podcast. Make sure to hit that bell, subscribe on any and all platforms, and don't you forget that I am your friend.
I'm your friend, but if I ever see you in the ring, I can beat you. Don't you know? Yeah.